Masechta Zevachim, Daf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, we're starting 5 lines from the bottom. Zog the early on we learned about that. Rabbi Lezer says we learned the hekish of Asham to Chatos, Benegei to Mashava Shlei Lishma. We had the wrong Mashava that it will be possible Asham like a Chatos. Now we're going to learn an additional din. Tonight we learned the Mishnah later on in Pei Aleph on the base. Rabbi Akiva would say, Kol Dam Shenichnasu Leichel Chaper Psulim. But any blood, meaning that from the Mizbeach HaChitzon that was brought into the Heichel, will be possible the carbon. The word Vechol tells us is Maba all karbanis. Chatas Bavad. Only a Chatas. He doesn't learn Kol to be Maba Kol HaKarbanis. Rather, he learns Kol to be Kailel, to include Chatas Yachid, Chatas Tzibur, well, it's Chonim Unakevis. Abelazar says, Af Asham, even Asham becomes possible. Shenam Kachatz Karasham. In the pasuk it says Kachatz Karasham to tell you that Asham will also be possible. In fact, you might be like no Abelazar. It's understood according to Abelazar. Like he said his reasoning. It says Kachatz Karasham, so we compare Asham to Achatas. My time. What's the reason? Why do they say Lagabi this din? Asham is not compared to Achatas. Asham nichnas damei lefnim pasul loy matzas hamnet. You cannot say that Asham that was brought into the Heichel will pass the carbon, because I'll be mashing mitzad akavachem ma'ela from akavachem ma'ela ma'ela she kol, just like Eila is completely burnt on the mizbeach nichnas dam lefnim sheda, and nevertheless Eila, which is more chama because it's all burnt on the mizbeach, but you say if we brought the blood into the Heichel, it's still kasha, even with such a chamadik carbon. Asham hakal, the asham which is more was much more lenient because it's not completely burnt like kol shkein. For sure, it shouldn't become possible if it was brought into the Heichel. In fact, the Gemara slugs up this kavachem. Mal Eila is more lenient than asham. Why? Shekein in mechaperes, because Eila doesn't come to be mechaper on Aveda, Mashenkin Ba'asham, it comes to be Mechaper. So since Asham is more Chamor, perhaps I'll say that Asham will be puzzled. Says the Gemara, and for the Gemara, Minchas Chayta, the Minchas Chayta of Ani, the Ani who cannot afford to bring a shepsel, so he brings a Mincha. So he brings a cup, by the way, he brings according to what he can afford. Techir, that the psul is not totally in kapara, because a mincha sachoita does forgive on a sin, and nevertheless it doesn't become puzzle if it's kmitza, which takes the place of a behema. It's kmitza takes the place of a behema, and it was brought into the heichel. And nevertheless, we say it's still kosher. The pasuk comes to teach us the psul by a carbon is if the blood was brought into the heichel. Mincha, there's no dam, so it's the kmitza that corresponds to the dam. So you see, even the asham doesn't become pasul like bringing the blood into the heichel because of the kavachim from Eila. And you cannot say because it's mechaper, it's more chomer, because you see minchas chayta, which is also mechaper, and it's brought into the heichel. It's not. The din is that it's still kosher. Let us bring an example of Chatz Ha'if, because which is mechaperes, and even though it doesn't, and nevertheless it doesn't become possible when you bring in the blood into the heichel, and it would have been better than choosing a minchas chayta which has no blood. It's only kemach. There's no blood. So if you could have brought a raya from Chatz Ha'if where there's dam and mamish, this is much more similar to Chatz Ha'if. Why don't we bring an example from that? And for the Gemara, because by the Chatz Ha'if, by the Rabbi Avin but because of Chatz Ha'if, whether it becomes possible when you bring the blood into the heichel or not, or it doesn't become possible, was a shayla of Rabbi Avin. He was misupik and he never answered that. That's why we didn't bring a raya from Chatz Ha'if. In fact, you might have slug up this case. The proof from Minchas Chayta, because Minchas Chayta, the Torah was lenient that it doesn't become, the reason why it doesn't become possible when you bring it into the Heichel, because you can't min Zevach, because it doesn't get slaughtered. Mashenkin Asham is a carbon that does get slaughtered. So maybe since it gets slaughtered, maybe if you bring the blood of a behemoth that gets slaughtered into the Heichel, we'll passel it. So the Gemara answers the carbon of Eila, which is more chamor, and it's nishchat, we say it doesn't become puzzle. For sure, Asham, which is more lineage, for sure shouldn't become puzzle. Chazadin, and it goes back and forth. Later, the tchuna that's in the Eila, which is not mechaperes, doesn't exist by minchas chayta, which is mechaper. Later, Mitzat Sheni, the tchuna that's in minchas chayta, that it's not, there's no shchita, doesn't exist by Eila. But we find that these two tchunes aren't the cause for it to become puzzle. And therefore, they don't become puzzle when it's brought into the Heichel. Hatzad Hashem Shabbat. The side that they both have in common, the Dama Oila and the Koimetz HaMincha, is that Shehin Kachim. They're Kachim because probably Cain, Nichz Dam Lefnim, Kshenim, if they brought the blood inside, the Heichel is still going to be kosher. Afani, Avi, Asham, so too, I'll bring Asham, I'll include Asham, Shu Kedesh Kadashim, which is Kodesh Kadashim too, and nevertheless, Nichz Dam Lefnim kosher. If the blood was brought inside the Heichel, it'll still be kosher. Rabbi Barnish asked a Shaila on this limit. Let's slug up this Zevachim. Between Oila and Minchas Chayta, they are more lenient. They don't have a set amount for to purchase a carbon. Which is more chamosh, it has a fixed amount. It has to be minimum 2 shkolim of kesef. So since Asham has a chumrah, perhaps I would say it would be possible if you brought the blood into the Heichel. Says only this is the reason of the Chachamim that an Asham doesn't become possible when you bring in the blood into the Heichel. Because the pasuk says B'chol chatas. So it says Dama. So we darshan Dama Shalzu. Only the blood of the carbon chatas passes the carbon if the blood is brought into the Heichel. The loy Dama Shalacher, but not the blood of another carbon, meaning a Asham. It will not become possible. Now from this miyut is a kasha Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer holds even the Asham does become possible. It says Dama, so how he's going to explain the Piddush of Dama? And he'll learn Dama that the Achatis becomes possible only if you bring the blood into the Heichel. The Loi Psara, that's what the Dama is coming to teach us. Not if you brought the flesh of the carbon into the Heichel. Ve'idach says, what about the Rabbanan? How did they dash in from this word to exclude other Kabbanas when the exclusion is needed to teach the achatas themselves? Achatas becomes possible only when the blood is brought in and not when the basa. So they answer because they could have said dam, and instead it says dama with a hey. So this extra hey, this that they added a hey, Kedash also another did that only achatas and not other kabbanes. What is Rabbi Lezer? Why isn't Rabbi Lezer dashin 2 dashes out of this word dama? And the Gemara dam like dam with the hey, the dama he does not dashin because it's the derech hatayra to write the fitting lashon according to the rules of diktuk, and that's why he wrote me dama. Even though the Maisi he could have wrote dam, but mitzad diktuk it's supposed to be written dama. So the Gemara now asks on the Shita of Rabbi Lezer that an Asham that's sacrificed Shleim L'Shma is possible. It's understood according to Rabbanan now, Mishnah the Amri Asham Sheshchat Shleim L'Shma Kasha. I understand according to Rabbanan that an Asham Shleim L'Shma is Kasha. Hainu Deiskish Mincha L'Chatas Mincha L'Chatas and Mincha L'Asham. This is now understood why the Torah compared Mincha to Chatos and the Mincha to Asham. The time that we learned about Rabbi Shimon says in the Negei to Mincha, it says Kodesh Kadashim He Kachatos v'Chasham. That's the words of the pasuk. This hekish of Mincha to Chatos and Asham comes to teach us that there's a Mincha which is like a Chatos and there's a Mincha like a Asham. How? Minchas Chayta Reik Chatos. Minchas Chayta is like a Chatos. Why? Lafika, how? Lafika yim kematza hakoyin. If the koyin made a kmitza shalei lishma, without the intention of that mincha psula, just like a chatas that was yishach shalei lishma. But on the other hand, minchas nedava rei kasham. But if it's a minchas nedava, before we were talking about minchas chayta. Minchas chayta has a din like a chatas. If he had the wrong intentions, then if it was shlei lishma, it's going to be possible like a chatas. If it's a minchas nedava, it's like a asham. Lefikov, in kumatza hakoyin. If the koyin made a kmitz shlei lishma, kshein, it's going to be kosher, because according to Reb Shimon, he says a chatas shenishcha shlei lishma is psula, but a asham that was nishcha shlei lishma is kosher. Minchas nedava will have a din like asham that will be kosher shlei lishma. But according to Rabbi Lezer, who holds that even the asham shenishcha shlei lishma is possible. L'may say iskish mincha lechatas or mincha leasham. He should have said mincha. It should have said kodesh kadashim kachatasi without saying mekasham, because asham and chatas have the same din. So why did he compare it to a asham? But the Gemara, Rabbi Lezer will explain that the mincha is compared to chatas and asham for a different drasha. For a different drasha of Reb Shimon. It's not that we learned in the Mishnah. A mincha shaloi, that the kaimitz was not placed with klisharis. Psula. First, before we start, the mincha, if you look at a mincha, it has the four avodas of a regular carbon. If you look at the Rashi, shaloi b'klisharis, shaloi kiddush ha-kaimitz b'klisharis psula, shamanach zehukshim l'zvachim. Turn haba avodas. Kmitza, he says the kmitza that we do by a mincha is like the shechita by a regular carbon. Then he says, Matan koimetz, the kmitza, b'kli shares, is connected kabbalah sadam, is like the receiving of the blood. Haylacha, bringing the kli shares to the mizbeach, is connected haylacha, connected haylacha, like the blood that you bring to the mizbeach. Haktara, connected zika, and the burning of the mincha is like the spraying the blood of the mincha. So here he starts off saying, if it was not placed in the klishares, the kmitza, rather he took it with his hand. Well, I mean, if he took it and he didn't take it with his hand, he didn't place it with klishares. So if he didn't place it with klishares, so that's missing like the avodah of kabbalah sadam is missing that avodah. Reb Shimon says it's kosher. What's the reason of Reb Shimon that he says it's kosher? He says because Hamakra, it says by mincha kodesh kadoshim he kachatas v'cha. So why did you compare a mincha lechatas and to asham to tell us that the avodas are not all the same? There are two ways of avodas mincha. But like the biyad, if he took the kmitza only with the hand, without placing it in mizbeach and just using his hand, without placing it into klishares, and he's bringing it with his hand, he does the kmitza with his hand, and he brings it with his hand to place it on the fire without placing it in the klishares. Then he has to use his right hand. The kohen has to, just like the kohen sprays from the blood with the right, that's is the right fingers on the mizbeach. If he came to do the avodah, so too, if he did it biyad, it would have to be with the right hand. But b'kli shares, if he accepted with the kli shares, then even the small, he can even do it with his left hand. He doesn't have to, but he can do it even with his left hand. Kasham, like Hasham, that according to Rabbi Shimon, the zikah could be done with the left hand, and it's kasham b'Hasham. And all the meaning kosher b'asham, and not only by asham, but all the kabbanis except for achatas. Reb Shimon haikra, Reb Shimon this pasuk mapalei lahachi. He says this pasuk you're dashing from the kachatz kasham. I'm sorry, kitch kasham kachatz kasham. First of all, you learned out that if he made a kmitz shalei l'shma, it's going to be kosher like a asham. And then you also learn the din that we said, if he does it with the hand, it has to be with the right. The kmitz with the hand, he has to be with the right hand. And if he doesn't, he accepts it with a kli, it can even be done with the left. How can you learn out both? drushes from the same pasuk. And the Gemara Ika Kra, like Rabbi Yehuda B'Reider, Rabbi Chiyudi also. The Ika of the pasuk is like we said before, like the drasha of Rabbi Yehuda B'Reider, Rabbi Chia, that if he does the kmitz with a hand, then it has to be done with the right hand, and if he accepts it with a kli, it could even be done with the left. That's what the Ika of the pasuk is coming to teach us. Minchas chayta the psula shalei l'shma, and this that a minchas chayta is possible if you did a kmitza shalei l'shma. That's how different. We have it from a different place, a different reason. Chatas ma'im, like we said, chatas time amai. What is the reason that we say by chatas shenishcha shalei l'shma it's going to be psula? Why is it going to be psula? It says by there chatas he, so it's mashma he ksheda only if it was nikiv kehilchasa. But minchas chayta namik, but if it's not, meaning that it's kasha only if it was sacrificed kilachasa. And minchas chayta namik sibah. It also says the word he, chatas he. So by minchas chayta, since it says also he, so we find that the pasuk tells us that minchas chayta becomes possible if the kmitza was done shalei lishma. From the word he, not from the whole general pasuk of kachatas v'chasham. Okay, Zok the Yemad Ulu Rabbanan that a Marsha Asham that was Yeshach and Shalei Lishma and Asham that was brought in the blood that was brought in the Heichel, and we don't compare Asham to Chatas, that should be possible. Why do we compare Asham to Chatas? If you're saying by Asham it's going to be kosher, so according to Rabbanan, we made the hekesh only leimelach machatas to nesmicha, afashim to aton smicha. Only to teach us, just like by chatas, you need the leaning of the hands on the head of the animal. So too by asham. The Mishnah brought the shita banut another Tana that argues on the Tanakama. His name is Yosef ben Chini. That all the kabbalas hanishchotin on the 14th of Nisan l'shem Pesach, and also throughout the whole year for chatos. Pesach is only in the time, and it's a lot of time, and Chatos all year round. If he did a Shalei Lishma, it's Psula. Just like a Pesach, the Chatos that was Yeshach and L'Shem Kab Macha is Psula. So we say both, a Chatos and Hashem that was Yeshach for a different carbon, meaning Pesach in the day of 14th of Nisan from Chatzos till Bein Habayim. If he shechted for a different carbon other than a Pesach, it's going to be puzzle, and a Chatos, it's also going to be puzzle. Rabbi Yochanan said, that even Rabbi Elazar passes other carbonis that was Yeshach and L'Shem Pesach, in it's a lot of time. Let's say they had a carbon shlamim, and they said, I have in mind this shlamim should now be a L'Shem Pesach on the day of the 14th, from Chatzos till Ben Habayim. Or you had in mind a shlamim for a chatas throughout the whole year, like the Braisa will bring soon. So they both say the same thing, that it's going to be possible. So before the Gemara brings the Braisa, the words of Rabbi Elazar, he brings a shita that argues on Rabbi Yochanan. What's the shita? So he says, Rabbi Ima ba'achedim l'shem chatas pligi, Yisman chayni, and Rabbi Elazar arguing the din of other kabbanis that was yeshach l'shem chatas. Let's say they took ha'ila l'shem chatas, that Rabbi Elazar didn't passel, only others if it was other kabbanis l'shem Pesach. But if it was other kabbanis and he had in mind, let's say Ayla or Shlamim L'Shem Chatas, is going to be kosher. That's according to the Rabbi Elazar. And Yosef ben Chayne will say it's all going to be puzzle. The Tanya Rabbi Braisa. Now the Gemara brings the words of Rabbi Elazar in the Braisa, that which, if we understand, Rabbi Yochanan are arguing the Tanya HaPesach She'avra Shenasei, a Pesach that became too old. It's over 1 year old. It cannot be makiv as a Pesach, so it's considered as a shlamim. Ushchatim is money, but he did shachted on Abba Asa ben Nisan, and it's a lot of time lishmei for the shame of Pesach, for the sake of Pesach. It's as if he was makav hashlamim l'shem Pesach. L'chein hasheichet, somebody who shachs achedim, other karbanis l'shem Pesach bizmanoi, he shachs other karbanis with the sake, with the kavanah for Pesach in the allotted time from Chatzos till Ben Abayim. Rabbi Lezer Paisel, Rabbi Lezer says it's possible. Rabbi Yeshua Marsha. Rabbi Yeshua is Marsha. So you have Mefurish L'Maraisa. Rabbi Lezer passes other kabbanis, which is Nishchot L'Shem Pesach, Bizmanoi. He passes. Rabbi Lezer here says Mefurish L'Maraisa Vaket that he passes other kabbanis that were Yeshach L'Shem Pesach, like Yosef ben Chuni. Amar Rabbi Yeshua, Im Mishai Yemei Sashana Shah Paschene Kasha. So we learned in the Braisa about a Pesach that was already too old, and he shechted it. He had in mind for a shlamim, and he shechted it bizmanoi b'aba'asa b'nisim, or he shechted l'shem Pesach. I'm sorry, he says shechted l'shem Pesach. That's the second case. It's nevertheless. So let's start again. A Pesach that's is already past a year old, and it's already possible for a common Pesach. It's considered as a shlamim, and he shechted it b'aba'as b'nisin for l'shem Pesach. So it's as if he was makav shlamim l'shem Pesach, and so too, if he shechted other karbanis for l'shem Pesach in the time that you're supposed to bring a Pesach, Rabbi Lezer Paisel, Rabbi Lezer passes it. So you see Befedish in this B'rais, Rabbi Lezer passes other kabbanis that were nishchat l'shem Pesach, like and in the time when you're makav a Pesach, like Yosef ben Cheni. Rabbi Shua Marsha, Rabbi Shua's Marsha. But before Mamash, you see Rabbi Lezer passes the other kabbanis that you brought l'shem Pesach. In a lot of time that you're supposed to bring a Korban Pesach, it's going to be possible like Yosef ben Cheni. Rabbi Yeshua, so Rabbi Yeshua wants to prove his shita from Kavachem. If throughout the year, she'ena kosher, a Pesach is not kosher when he shachs it lishmai, when he has for the sake of a Korban Pesach. Let's say he had in mind for a Korban Pesach on Rosh Hashanah. Of course, it's going to be possible, but a chedim kshedim lishmai, but in the other kabbanis are kosher when it's yishach lishmai for a Korban Pesach. Even according to Rabbi Lezer, even Rabbi Lezer passes only kabbanis that were slaughtered l'shem Pesach bizmanoi in a lot of time, like it brings down in the Braisa. If he had in mind other kabbanis, l'shem Pesach, but so it's possible. But so he's asking, l'cheda bizmanei shehu kasha. Well, what's if it's in a lot of time that you have to bring a Korban Pesach? If he separated an animal and he had in mind for a Korban Pesach, it's kasha. If it was nishit lishmai for the sake of a Korban Pesach. So madach for Korban Pesach, it's going to be kosher. Shouldn't it be kosher if others were yeshachim for the sake of a Korban Pesach? In short, you find the Tanya of Rabbi Yeshua is that the shechita that you did for the sake of a Korban Pesach in its time is greater than shechita with a machshava shaloi bezmanei. How? We find a Korban Pesach itself that was slaughtered l'shem Pesach in its right time, it's going to be kosher. But if he had in mind for a behemoth to be geshach l'shem Pesach, let's say on Rosh Hashanah, not bizmanai, not on Aba'as b'nisim, it's possible. So then, therefore, if other karbanis are going to be kosher, even when it's slaughtered the rest of the year l'shem Pesach, we say if he took other karbanis and he had in mind l'shem Pesach throughout the year. So if he took other kabbanis like shlamim and he had in mind l'shem Pesach, so first of all, if he had in mind by other kabbanis shlamim for oila for shlamim that it's going to be kosher by other kabbanis, even when it's meaning throughout the year, even when it was even when it was Gishach Mishai Ma'isa Shana L'Shem Pesach, it's still going to be kosher because it's going to have a din like a shlamim. Surely, if it was nishchet in the allotted time of Pesach, for sure, if other kabbanis were Gishach L'Shem Pesach, it should be kosher L'Shem Pesach. I can reverse those words and say, but throughout the rest of the year, a Pesach that was Gishach L'Shmai, for the sake of a Pesach, is not kosher. Even though kosher l'shem kabbanis achenim, even though it's going to be kosher for other kabbanis, like for shlamim, bizmane shu kosher, but in a lot of time on Abba Asa, when he was shachtel l'shmai, the carbon is going to be kosher as a Pesach. Shouldn't it be kosher when he shachted l'shem the Pesach for the sake of other karbanis? It should for sure be kosher also. So according to this, a Pesach b'Abba Asa that was geshachten shalei l'shmai for the sake of Ashlamim should be kosher. This is what you're going to say. We know it's possible. So once Abelazar explained that if you dash nakavachemi, you run into a problem. You come into the wrong maskanes. So he says, "Mali hoshu achedim b'shoyim eisashana lishmei." What's the difference if he was machshe kabbanis achedim, meaning other kabbanis that was shachted throughout the year for the sake of Pesach, which is more lenient? We know shekenu kasha, it's kasha. When he shachs it l'shem achedim, when he shachs then l'shem different kabbanis, v'yichshu gam achedim hanishchat mizman l'shmai, let the achedim that was slaughtered bismanai in the allotted time that the carbon pesach is supposed to be sacrificed lishmai for a different carbon, it should also be kosher. So just like you said that if he was machsher he shachted throughout the rest of the year other kabbanis hashlama for a Pesach, it's kosher, and we said it works the reverse also. Or if he was or if he took a Pesach and he had a mind for a kabban shlamim, it's going to be kosher. So then yuchshu achedim mizman l'shmai, you should work both ways. Shekenu ojazu pasel, say it's a two-way street. Just like achedim that's nishchat mizman l'shmai, you say that a Pesach is manai, meaning in a lot of time on the 14th day from Chatzos till Ben Abayim. We said if he shachted it others for the sake of a Pesach, it's going to be puzzle. So too, if he shachted the Pesach l'shem acherim, it's going to be puzzle. You say because a carbon Pesach bismani is more chamor, that if it becomes puzzle. If you had a mind for another carbon, so even if you had a mind l'shem Pesach bismanai, it's going to be puzzle because it works both ways. Just like other kabbanis is going to be puzzle if it's l'shem Pesach, so too Pesach l'shem other kabbanis should be puzzle. Just like the whole year, you say it's a two-way street. If you makiv a Pesach l'shem shlam, it's kasha. So if it's a shlam l'shem Pesach, it's kasha. So too, when it comes to a lot of time for a couple Pesach, you should say it's a two-way street. Just like a Pesach, if you had in mind other kabbanis for Pesach, it's not going to be good. So too, if you had in mind a Pesach for Shlamim, it's also not going to be good. Or the reverse, both ways, it's not going to be good. Because you see, Shlamim throughout the year is going to be good for a Pesach. and Pesach is good for Shlomim. But when it comes to the Pesach, you say that if it's if a Pesach was sacrificed for a Shlomim, it's not going to be good. So you see, Shlomim is more chamor. Shlomim on Erev Pesach becomes pasul. So you see that Shlomim is more severe because a Shlomim for a Pesach, it's good for a couple Pesach, but Shlomim on Erev Pesach is going to be pasul. So you see that you make Shlomim more harsh than a Pesach, and we know by Pesach it's a special pasuk that teaches us if it was Nisha Shlei Dishma, it's pasul. And by Shlomim we don't have this kind of a special pasuk. Obviously, Pesach is supposed to be more common than Shlomim. So Rabbi Elazar retracted and he proved his shita from a different time. But we find a behema that was designated for a couple Pesach, and you cannot be makav on Pesach. You could be makav b'tei Shlomim. That's called Moiseh Pesach. It could be brought as a Shlomim. But when it comes to Moiseh Shlomim, a behemoth that was designated for a couple Shlomim, and at the end you didn't need to be makav as a Shlomim. And he brings down, for instance, that he designated a carbon for a couple Shlomim and he lost it, and they designated a new carbon, and the first carbon came back. So over there we say the Moiseh Shlomim cannot be used as a Pesach. Uma Pesach has a shaykhis to Shlomim because we find Shemesei Ba Shlomim. We know that the Moiseh of a Pesach could be brought as a Shlomim. Shchate Bizmanei Lishum Shlomim Pasul. Even though if he shechted Bizmanei for the sake of a Shlomim, it's going to be Pasul. If so, Shlomim Shein Meisarim Ba Pesach. If so, Shlomim that the Moiseh of the Shlomim cannot be used, it has no shaykhs to come Pesach. If it's shechted for the sake of a Pesach in its time, and it didn't shehep, so for sure it should be possible. Because Shlomim has no shaykhs to a Pesach, because a Shlomim cannot be used as a Pesach. So for sure, if he shechted the Shlomim the same Pesach, it for sure will be possible. So Rabbi Yeshua answered, if you dance in the Kavachim like that, we find that a behemoth that was designated, there was a second behemoth for a chatas as a guarantee that if the chatas gets lost, they'll have the second chatas. So the guaranteed chatas that he's using for just in case is not being used. So what do we do with it? You put it as a oila on the kaisam mizbeich. On the time when the mizbeich was empty. But if you have a moiseh oila, if he bought a behema for oila, he designated enough too much money for oila, and he had leftover money, you cannot buy with extra money a chatas. Only you have to buy an additional oila. Uma chatas moiseh ba oila madach chatas. If you have extra chatas, you can use it as a oilas kayis. So there's a shaykh is chat l'shem oila psula, and nevertheless, if he shechted chatas l'shem oila, it's going to be pasul oila she'emay says about chatas oila that it has no shaykhs to chatas. It's the extra money cannot be bought with it a carbon chatas. If he took oila and chat l'shem chatas and it didn't take psula, shouldn't be pasul. We know it's kosher. So obviously, this thought of this shnit of a kavachem cannot be used. Amalei Rabbi Elazar loy. He says there's no hechech to be tailored these two dinim, one and the other, the oila and a chatas and a pesach and a shlomim. Why? Imamat v'chatas. If you say by chatas the oila and the same thing, other kavanas, it doesn't become possible k'shi nishchicha lishma. If it was is shechted for the sake of a oila. So it's right that it should be like a chatas shekain, because the chatas itself sheda when it's yishach lishma kol hashana kula. If by a chatas, if it was shechted for the sake of a chatas all year, it's going to be kosher. So Rabbi Elazar said, like, because by chatos, it's a kosher if it's not lishma all year round. Abtoimah b'Pesach lishma ela b'zmani. Sheina kosher ela lishma ela b'zmani. It's only kosher for a short period of time. Ba'abas and Nisan. Versus a chatos is kosher lishma kol sheina kula. And hayvu atzmei pasul lishma, since he himself is pasul when it's nichshet lishma. So there's times that a Pesach is pasul when it's not lishma. Dinu sheyi pasul lishma achein lishma. Therefore, the din is that other kabbalas that are nishchatim, for the sake of a Pesach, it's going to be pasul. Even though we find, okay, so we'll just leave it at that. So again, since Hayil Vahu Pasul Ishmai, since the Pesach throughout the year is Pasul Ishmai, therefore the din is that it should be also Pasul if other Kabbanis were shachted for the sake of a carbon Pesach. So if he shachted l'shem gavoya, meaning for Kedusha, more Kedusha the Kekabim, then what lechatchila was designated, then it's kosher. But if the carbon was designated for a high-level carbon, let's say Kodesh Kodashim, and he had in mind for a lower level, for Kachim Kam, let's say, psulin. Avash mas mishmei de Rabbi Yochanan, Avash learned the name of Rabbi Yochanan, but Avach Reida of mas mishmei de Rabbi Yanai. And Avach, the son of Rabba, learned it in the name of Rabbi Yanai. My time of the Shimnachi Azariah, what's the reason of the Shimon, the brother of Azariah, because it says in the passage, "Lo yichal Hashem es kachi, v'nei yisrael sashay yarim laHashem." Al pi pashtus, the pshutei, the pasuk is warning Kanim that they shouldn't be mechal of the tumah and kachim shebnei yisrael mafrishim laHashem. Once again, al pi pshutei, the pasuk is warning the Kanim that they shouldn't desecrate the tumah and the kachim that the bnei Yisrael had designated for Hashem. Only if in the time of the shechita of the kabbanis they had in mind for another carbon of a kedusha that's higher than this one that he designated, then it's not going to be mischalim. Then it'll be good, but meaning it won't be mischalim. But if he had in mind for a lower level of kedusha than he originally designated for, mischalim, they will become pasul. In fact, is this what the pasuk is coming to teach us? We needed to teach us the din of Shmuel. How do we know somebody who eats devil without taking off truma that there's the punishment of Misa B'nei Shemayim? But the pasuk is coming to warn: don't be mechal da'achila, meaning don't eat before taking off truma, to tell us the severe punishment that is Misa B'nei Shemayim. And the Gemara in Cain, if the Torah only wanted to teach us the din of Shimon Achi Azariah, Lichliv Kra, Shehurmu, the Torah should have said Shehurmu that he had designated, and it's higher than what he had designated from before. Then and we could have learned that Rasha of Shimon Achi Azariah. Ma Yasher Yorimu. Why does he use a lashon Asher Yorimu? From this that he said Asher Yorimu b'lashon Nasa that he will take off. So Zaraya that he's referring also to Maisa that in the future that he will take off. He shouldn't desecrate the Achila till he takes off the Tumah. So we learn out both the Rashis from it. Sai, the Lashon Harama means, will teach us the difference. So if he designated for something that's higher than what, for higher to Kedusha Dika carbon, where it won't be Mischalel, like Shimon Achai Azariah. And from this, that the pasuk used the lashon hara, it comes to teach us that if you're going to eat from a carbon that from food that you didn't take off tumah, that you'll have there's a Misa B'nei Shemayim. But Rabzeda here's the kasha when Shimon Achi Azariah said the kabbonis that was slaughtered for a higher standard carbon, it's kshein, but he wanted to know be'emeratzin. Is it, and are we going to say that it's not oila for the bailam l'shem chayva, and he has to bring another carbon for his chayv? Chi Palik, Bechada Palik. So we find that when he was arguing on the Tanakama, he was only arguing in one din. If he shechted it for a lower Kedusha, that according to Tanakama, it's kosher. And Shemin Achi Azai is going to be apostle, or perhaps Kshedim Umeratzen, Ubetarte Pligi. Or perhaps the Tanakama and Shemin Achi Azai were arguing two dinyan. That if it was Nishchet to L'Shem Gavai Mehem, if it was Yeshachim for a higher standard carbon, the Tanakama holds it's going to be kosher, and he's not Yotzei Deichavasei. He's going to have to bring another carbon, and Shimon Achi Azari will hold it's Kshedim and Meratzim. So it's two dinim. That's one machlekes that it's going to be Meratzah, and Beis if he slaughtered L'Shem Namuch Mehem, if he had is slaughtered for a lower standard carbon than what he originally designated for it. So the Tanakama says it's still kosher and Be'enim Meratzim, and Shimon Achi Azari will say that it's possible. So we want to know if it's a two dinim in the machlekes or just one din. Is the machlekes is begavoya? If he had in mind for a higher standard carbon, that it's also going to be meratzah, or there was no machlekes that it's only going to be kosher ve'ein meratzah. And by Namach, of course, and that for sure we know that they'll hold it's possible. Meaning that Shimon Achi Azai will hold it's possible, and he argues on the Rabbanan. But we want to know if he also argues, if he had in mind for a higher standard carbon, that not only will it be kosher, but it will also be merutza versus the Tanakama that it's ain't merutza. That he'll have to bring another carbon to be Yotzei Deichavasei. The Gemara is trying to answer this suffix. Rabbi Zeka, Toshma, come in here and I'll bring you a raya. From one of the Gemara's that Shimon Achi Azai brought in the Mishnah, even though these are all Kachim Kalam, Chay Maisa, that he had in mind L'Shem Shlamim. So you see, he had in mind to Shech L'Shem Gavai Mehem, Shlamim Sheshchat L'Shem B'Chayr, a Shlamim that was Shech L'Shem B'Chayr, L'Shem Maisa Psulin. Because there he's shechted for a lower standard. If you're going to think Shein Umaratzin, that it's kosher, and it also is Yotzei Deichavasei, his chayva bring a cup, he doesn't have to bring another one. Is it then shaykh that by B'chay, or also Maisa, is it shaykh that he should, there was like fulfillment of a chayv, it doesn't come to be mechap on a person, or to fulfill a chayv that's placed on him. It's only mitzat kedusha that you're bringing it. Ma'aser has a kedusha, or b'chayr has the kedusha, the first one. El b'vadai, then when bringing these examples, Shimon Achi Azai came to say kshedim ve'emeratzin, that he held for sure it's not going to fulfill his chayv. Or when the sefer, since the second dugma is kshedim ve'emeratzin, Eishanami. So we're going to learn also in the Reisha that it was kshedim ve'emeratzin. Even where it is shaykh kapara, we're going to learn, like the sefer that we're talking about, that it has nothing to do with fulfilling a chayv. It's only going to be kasha, and if he tak had a chayv in the Reisha, it's to forgive for Naveda, it's not going to be meratzah if he changed the covenant for a different standard. Of course, for a higher standard. So you want to meet here, is that a raya? Because Hakadisa, each dogma is talking about its case. The Sefer is talking about no kapara, so therefore it's a meratzah. But the Reisha, where it's talking about a kapara, maybe it would be meratzah for the chayv if he did it for a higher standard. Didn't bring the second dogma to teach us Sheikhet L'Shem Gavai Mehem. It's Shein Mehem Meratzah Mai Kamash. What is he coming to teach us? With this dogma B'Chayr and Ma'aser that was Yeshach L'Shem Shlamim. Gavai V'Nama Kamash Malan. Is he only coming to teach us if he brought it he changed it to a higher standard, it's going to be kosher. The lower standard is going to be, he changed the comment to a lower standard, it's going to be possible. Tanina, that we already learned before, as an example, Keitzat Kachi Kachim, Sheshechat L'Shem Kachim Kalam. He took Kachi Kachim, and he said he has he wants it to lower its standard to a Kachim Kalam, which we learned, it's Psulim. And then we learned Kachim Kalam, Sheshechat L'Shem Kachim Kachim. if he took kachim kalim and he had in mind for a higher standard for kachim, it's kosher. So why would they have to bring an additional case in the sefer? I would have said kachim kadashim v'kachim kalim hudi kegavay v'naimach. Only in between kachim kalim, there's separate categories of designating a kalim that was a lower standard for a higher standard. Kachim kalim was the lower standard. Kachim was the higher standard. Or he's designated for kachim, he had in mind for kachim kalim. Kachim is the highest standard. Kachim kalim is the lowest standard. In kalim, but in the sug of kalim, kachim kalim itself, I wouldn't say that you could differentiate. One is a higher standard and one is a lower standard. That's why we learn, no, there is. Shlam is a higher standard than B'chayil Maisa. Even this we already learned. Two kabbalas that come b'vasach la'azora. So one that is more holier comes before his friend. Shlamim kaimus abachayir. Mepnei shein tun and mehen abba. The dama shlamim is put on the mizbeach first because it's given two matanas which are four. Dama b'chayir is only one matana on one side of the mizbeach, and shlamim is usmichol and sachnut novzchaz v'sheik. Shlamim means the leaning of the hands on the head, the libation, the raising, the lifting of the thigh and the breast. Masheng b'chayir, you don't need all these things. So we already brought a raya from a previous Mishnah that the shlam is considered more in kachim kalim, more holier than a b'chayir and a ma'isa. So why would Shimon Achi Azariah have to bring that? If you want to ha'ika, this Mishnah is the makim ikri for this, to tell you, when it talks about the dinim of lishma, it comes to tell you that it has a greater kedusha. Shlam has a greater kedusha than Chayil Maisa. He, the one of later on, that we learned that about Shlam being a high kedusha. He agradon us, but that was only chapt b'derech agav. But this Mishnah is the Iker, where it tells you that the Shlomo has a much higher standard and it's much more cheshev. Sagt die Mishnah Shachas B'Abba, a carbon Pesach that was slaughtered in the morning before Chatzais on the 14th of Nisan Shalei L'Shmai, not for the sake of a Pesach. Rabbi Shua Machsher. Rabbi Shua is Machsher as a carbon Shlomo Kila Nishcha L'Shteish Aser. It's as if it was Geshacht before the 14th day, or like after the 14th day, because it wasn't a lot of time when a carbon Pesach is brought. I'm saying the parcels of this Pesach, Kilo Nishcha Ben Abayim. It's as if he slaughtered it Ben Abayim in the right time of the 14th of Nisan, and therefore it's going to be parcel. But the Tanakama, Rabbi Yeshua is going to be Marsha because he's Marsha all day. Doesn't only, we're going to learn about it later. It's not only for Chatzos till the evening. I received from the mouth of the 72 Zevachim that sat in the Sanhedrin in the day when they appointed Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah as the Nasi. That day they said, all the kabbanis that are eaten except for Eila, which is not eaten. That was slaughtered shleich l'shmak sheiv ha'kasha. El shlei oil balam l'mishum chayva chutz min ha'pesach min ha'chatas. Only the kasha, but they weren't yet the chayv, that the obligation of the covenant that they were supposed to bring, and except for pesach and ha'chatas, where it's going to be possible chatchila. Ben Azai didn't add to the psul of that's going to be possible shlei l'shma of Pesach and Chatas. He only added the Eila because all the other kabbanis are included in the cholim. They are able to be eaten, and which Ben Azai is made that they're not going to be puzzle, but Eila is not able to be eaten. That's why he says it's puzzle. But even though he gave this over, that's how he received from the Sanhedrin when they appointed Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, they didn't agree to it.